Good evening, everyone, or hello if you're joining from somewhere in the Western Hemisphere. Thank you so much for joining us today for this particular webinar, where we'll be exploring how students can build a balanced university list. So, if you are a current senior who is applying to university at this moment in time, you've likely submitted an early decision application at this point. Perhaps you've also submitted an early action application. And so it's really important for you to now think about reflecting on the list that you've developed with your counselor or with a coach that you've been working with, and how you're able to create a lot more balance in the list as it stands. So thank you again, and I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. My name is Dexter Padiachi, and I am an international higher education consultant as well as counselor. I've been doing school-based counseling for quite a number of years at this point, working with students from across the globe, including Africa and Asia, as well as the US, etc. And so it is my honor to be with you here today to discuss creating a balanced list. And so for this particular webinar, we will be focusing mainly on the US, but some of the principles that you learned today can be applied when looking at universities outside of the US too. And so I wanted us to think about how do you strategically approach this particular process? And one of the first things that I think is really important to note is that many webinars and information that you get out there are going to tell you to think about a reach school or a match school or a likely school. And these are really key terms within university advising. But I think importantly, what we should be thinking about is how do we move beyond just these generic terms to think about what is the right fit for you as a student and how you are growing and evolving. In addition to that, I think that many students don't oftentimes think about the institution or the university that they are applying to and what some of their priorities are. For example, if you look at some universities in the US, there are major initiatives in order to create a larger international body. And so you could be in the pioneering group of students who are forming part of this new international student body, which means that you might have a leg up in the applications process through the fact that you are an international student applying to these particular universities. How does it align with what you want to do? Perhaps they are focusing more on some STEM degrees or creating new opportunities and majors in AI, and that is your area of interest. And so it's really important to read about the university holistically. And what this ultimately means is that as you think about the university list or the universities that you'll be applying to, it's really important to think about how you can maximize your outcomes. You ideally want a number of offers so that you are able to make a decision, to think about how you are going to fit into the school environment, as well as how the academic program is going to fit your future aspirations. And this forms part of the long-term trajectory because university is not the end goal. This is part of your educational journey, and it is going to be part of a process of going into a career or maybe going into grad school. And so think about this in terms of the long-term opportunities that you have as well. So I wanted to start us off a little bit with thinking about what families, from my experiences, families misunderstand about the US admissions. The admissions is an institutional strategy problem. It's not a ranking test. And this is really, really important. Rankings, as they stand, oftentimes will make a university seem a lot more selective or become more exciting to an audience. And so, for the university itself, though, it is not the sole purpose to rank highly. Rather, it is thinking about how the admissions process is going to bring in a cohort of students who are going to form the intellectual and academic backbone of their community. It is always a relationship between the students and the professors and the administration informing what that university is going to look like and feel like. And so it's definitely a strategic decision that universities are taking when looking at students who are applying to their universities. Universities allocate places according to their mission, priorities, and cohort gaps. It's not only thinking about how can I rank the best student to the not so competitive student when they are applying to us. It's rather thinking through how does the student align with my mission as a university and some of the priorities that I might have. Perhaps I'm interested in recruiting more students from Thailand in the future, and so I'm going to make a concerted effort to go to Thailand as a university and engage with students in order to learn about the opportunities that they are looking for in a university so that I can share with them what we offer and how that might align. And so, therefore, it's really important to think about the overall strategic aspect of admissions when creating your university list. And oftentimes, a strong list aligns your narrative, who you are as a person, with the institutional identity. And I think that in some instances where we see this really coming through is particularly for liberal arts colleges. Many of the liberal arts colleges have a quite open curriculum where students can explore different fields of interest. And so, if you are a student who is really interested in computer science, but at the same time you are interested in ethics and law, perhaps a liberal arts college is going to be the best option for you when thinking about the overall university list that you are building. That means that you'll spend a lot more time adding 5 to 6 liberal arts colleges and maybe 4 to 5 research universities if you are a student that is suited for a liberal arts degree program. And so the framework that we oftentimes use when engaging with students and families about building the university list is to really think about what is the intellectual fit? Are your intellectual curiosities and interests going to be fueled and nurtured, and are you going to grow through that particular academic program? And attached to that is not just thinking about the courses that are offered, but what is the type of learning environment? Perhaps you are the type of student who likes to have quite a bunch of time with your professors. You want to be able to talk to them inside and outside of the classroom. You enjoy the intellectual challenge of having debate with your professors, or perhaps it's even about working in groups in order to find solutions to challenges that the world is facing. That means that you might want to consider a university that has a low student to professor ratio, meaning that for every 10 students, there's one professor. Because there are certain universities, particularly public and large research universities, where those numbers can grow to 1 to 50 or 1 to 100. And so you might not have as much face time with a professor. Perhaps you are rather speaking with a tutorial leader or someone who is currently completing their PhD. But if you really want to spend time with your professors, perhaps a smaller school is going to be a better fit for you. And so the learning environment then becomes really important as well. And so to think about the intellectual fit in terms of what the school is focusing on, what are the new programs that are coming up, what research are professors currently engaging with, and how does that align with your interests? And then you pair that with thinking through the entire learning environment and how you might want to engage with your peers as well as your professors. Are there research opportunities for you in your freshman year? Or do you need to wait until your third year in order to get an opportunity to engage with a professor? That's all really important. And then finally, again, thinking about the future, because this is just one part of your overall journey. What are the outcomes? What do the graduates at these particular universities do after completing their degree? What does the alumni network look like? Are there opportunities to engage with alumni when you are a student to receive mentorship or, let's say, internships with an alum? And then finally, thinking about global pathways. Do students who are at this particular university engage both within the classroom in global topics? And then do they have opportunities to study abroad? Are there internships that are abroad? Do perhaps some students from this particular university go off to do a postgraduate degree in a different country or work in a different country? So these are all important things to consider, specifically as an international student, where you might want to return home after a period of spending time in the US, for example, do they have networks within the country that you're from? And so the transition between university and finding your first job is not going to be as challenging. And so these things are all really important to consider when thinking about your university options. And so this is where it comes into how do we reframe and rethink about these terms, reach, match, likely. Oftentimes, people will use the term safety school. I've said this before in a webinar, but I don't think that a safety school exists because higher education has become so incredibly competitive that students are likely to get into a school, but there's no guarantee. And so, in thinking about this, I want you to reframe if you've heard the term a safety school, try to remove it from your vocabulary so that you can rather think about what are the types of universities where your background and your strength meets the demand quite clearly. A practical example of this is if you are applying to a university and you have an SAT score of 1450 but the university has a median of the SAT as 1550. That means that you are 100 points under the average SAT score of the incoming class. And so, therefore, you are going to be below it. So, therefore, that school is not a likely institution. Some other ways of thinking about this is as you are doing research and looking at the type of students that are admitted to these particular universities, have they done research? Have they done community service? Have they traveled abroad and did programs at universities? And if all of the answers to those questions are yes, and you've not had any of those experiences, that means that your background might not be ideally matched with that particular university. And so that's going to not be a likely school for you. However, if you've done certain things and a school is really interested in what the type of work that you're doing, let's take, for example, certain universities that really focus on technology, like MIT or Stanford, and you are an avid programmer and you've created an app that helps to identify an early storm warning for your community. That is taking your strength in technology as well as thinking about greater good. And that is a type of project that's going to stand out to these types of universities. Similarly, we can look at match, where your profile aligns with the competitive norms and program needs. Have you completed the courses that they are looking for in a prospective student? Have you gone above and beyond to push yourself intellectually and learn more outside of what the classroom offers you? And so if your test scores and your GPA or your grades overall for grade 9, 10, 11, and your senior year are quite competitive and it aligns with a university that typically would admit a student that is in the A to B range, and that is your range, then you are correctly matched with a school. And at the same time, you have reach schools that are unpredictable due to institutional priorities, and it focuses on high performance. So it's really important to note that for some of these universities, they will receive tens of thousands of applications that are going to meet the minimum requirements needed academically. So you have an A on your transcript. You've got a 1550 or a 1600 on the SAT. And these are all really competitive performance scores when it comes to academics. However, 10,000 students have met that, and they can only admit 2,500 students. And so while you may qualify academically, it's really important to note that you may need to have an X factor. And sometimes deciphering and understanding what that X factor is can be really challenging. And so it is important to think about when creating your university list, not to have too many reach schools. And as you know, all of the Ivies are going to be reach schools because they have quite low admit rates. Similarly, some of the top research universities in the US as well are definitely going to be reach schools. And so, what I've thought about is how do we really think about your competitiveness as a student for a particular university? And sometimes it's not that easy. We could look at most students who get into Yale have an A and A star if you are doing the A level or British curriculum system. Perhaps you have an American system and the GPA is going to be a 4.0 to 4.5 and you've met all of these different things. However, does it give a clear vision of what your competitive truly is, your competitiveness? So you should be thinking about what are the admissions data actually sharing? Are there certain trends? Are more majors in demand at a particular university? What are the limitations on it? If you look at Cornell University, for example, such a fantastic university, but their engineering program is very, very, very difficult to get into. And that's because there's a small number of spots available for students who are interested in the School of Engineering. They take a lot of emphasis or put a lot of emphasis on your readiness for the program. They want to think about, have you done scientific research before? Are you going to be able to enter the program and really contribute right from the beginning? And what is that learning journey going to be like? Because they know that the program is really demanding. And do you have the resilience when it comes to pushing through really challenging problem sets or having to spend hours at night working on a particular project? And so it's really important to think about what are you seeing in terms of trends when it comes to the admissions of a particular university? It's also really important to think about where are they oversubscribed, right? And so on many university pages, you are able to see the data that shows X amount of students come from this particular country and X amount of students come from this particular country. And if you are applying from that country, you might want to think to yourself, okay, if 50% of the applications are coming from the country that I'm from, am I going to stand out in this particular pool? Perhaps the reverse is true, where they only receive five applications from, let's say, the Philippines. And so within that particular realm, you definitely are going to stand out as a student. And so it's important to identify how your location, where you're from, your background, as well as your interests in your major and the experiences that you've had all tie in together when creating the university list. It's not as easy and straightforward as it seems. It takes a lot of thoughtful reflection because as a student, you want to ensure that you are maximizing the options that you have available to you. So how do you actually approach thinking about the academic fit as well as the academic environment of a particular school? And so the academics you are applying to university is the foundation. I think that sometimes, especially in the work that I've done, I've come across students who did not think so much about the academic experience. They mainly thought about the name brand of a particular university. And so they were trying to apply to all of the top ranked schools on Times Higher Education and QS ranking and top universities, instead of really taking a moment to understand who they are intellectually. So what you do is you really think about what is your intellectual style? What environment do you need in order to learn? What are the research opportunities that you've taken on in the past as a high school student? Perhaps it's been through a summer program or an online program like Pioneer Academics. Maybe your school has opportunities for you to do a capstone project. Or perhaps you went above and beyond and decided to do a personal project on your own. And so, if this is something that you'd love to continue doing, you need to ensure that the university is going to have these programs and structures in order to work with you on gaining the opportunities that you need. And so when we think about this, you've gained clarity around the type of student that you are. Now, how do you find the university that is going to match your academic personality? And I've just put in some examples here. So U Chicago and Swarthmore, for example, love analytical thinkers. And Swarthmore is a liberal arts college. U Chicago is a research university, but they share many similarities in terms of the breadth of opportunity there is to expand your mind intellectually, the focus that they have on research and challenging yourself, and the importance that they put on academic integrity. All universities do that, but I think that at these particular universities, you'll be asked to think about questions you've never even imagined before. And so that's really important to understand because those questions, then you need to approach them in a particular way that is very analytical. They want to teach you a scientific method that you can apply to any discipline, including English. English taught at these particular universities also take a very analytical approach. And so it's important to understand these nuances. And perhaps you're asking yourself, how will I ever get to know that? One, have a conversation with your college counselor, but two, also reach out to the universities themselves. As you are thinking about applying to a university, the admissions team would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And this is going to make you stand out as someone who is really thinking and intentional about the universities that they are applying to. Perhaps someone from your high school has gone to that particular university. Reach out to them and gain some experience from their lived experience of being at that particular university. And similarly, sometimes, or oftentimes, I should actually say, universities like to match current international students with prospective students. And so they might ask one of their current students to have a conversation with you so that you can learn about their experiences. And then, so we have this idea of the analytical thinker at U Chicago and Swarthmore, and then there are applied innovators at the likes of Stanford and Northeastern. These particular universities want you to not only work in theory, they want you to produce something practical. They want a real life impact that you can make through the work that you're doing. And so if you are someone who is problem solving oriented, or maybe even entrepreneurial, Northeastern and Stanford are going to be amazing opportunities for you to take ideas and turn them into realities in order to solve problems as well as think about entrepreneurship. And then, so now that you've understood this, how do we really think about what is offered at a university? So, how do you evaluate the learning approach that they have? So, some universities are going to have a distribution where you need to take two courses in the sciences, two courses in the social sciences, two languages, and two humanities courses. And that is a distribution that every single student needs to do. Other universities may have a core curriculum where you need to complete four different courses in four different disciplines as a core, and then you can solely focus on your major and you never need to think about another course outside of your particular discipline. Other universities have an open curriculum, and I went to a liberal arts college in the US that had an open curriculum. That's because I was an extremely curious person and I was uncertain of what I wanted to do. I knew that I was good at maths and economics, and I didn't love reading and writing that much. But at the same time, I always had the thought that the reason why I wanted to study maths was because I was good at it, not because I loved it. And so having an open curriculum meant that I could try every single program out there from philosophy to biology to art history to economics to English literature. And I finally stumbled upon a degree that absolutely changed my life, and that was the right fit for me. But if you are a student who has a clear idea of what you want to do, perhaps an open curriculum is not the perfect option for you. And so, with some examples of this, you can look at Brown University, a really top tier Ivy League university, but it has a lot of freedom when it comes to how you think about your education. They even have an option for you to create your own degree by combining courses from different disciplines. Columbia has a shared canon, which means that you need to do the core part of or distribution rather of the different courses in different disciplines, and then you can focus in what you really want to do. Whereas MIT, it has a combination of both. There is a lot of academic freedom, but you also need to become an expert, and this is what they are really keen on honing when you are a student there? Are you going to be the best engineer, electrical engineer, or mechanical engineer? And so the technical depth is really part of what they see as the core of their educational model. And this is why, in the past, for example, MIT required all students applying to take the physics as well as the maths SAT subject tests. And so it's not just thinking about, have you done physics and maths at high school? You've done the SAT? No, we want an additional test to see that you are able to do physics and maths at a particular level, because that was part of the core of the university. And with this, again, just thinking about the different ways in which you can engage in some of this research, evaluate access to research, not just the volume of labs. And this is so important. There are some fantastic public universities out there that have state-of-the-art labs. However, students can only access those labs when they are a junior or a senior in college. Perhaps it is your desire to do research quite early on in your university life, as I mentioned previously, and that might not be the right fit for you. The structure of it, can you do research in a structured way? Oftentimes, and I'm seeing this more and more with universities, after your first year or your second year, you can remain at the university and do research. So are there those structured opportunities to really engage in deep learning? And universities, not just from fall semester to the end of spring semester, but the summer becomes part of your intellectual journey too. And so it's a full 12-month process of learning. And that might be something that's really important to you. And I'm just going to skip over the faculty to student ratio because we've covered it earlier. Campus culture also becomes really important. So what are the behavioral norms at a particular university? Is there a certain intensity when it comes to academics? I found that when I visited some universities as a professional, I thought about the fact that I was really keen on applying to these universities when I was younger. But when I got there, personally, I didn't like the academic competition. I have a much more collaborative approach to learning where I want to learn alongside my peers. I don't want to be in competition with them. And in conversations with current students, I got a sense that it was very, very competitive to be seen, to have opportunities with the professor. And while that definitely is an environment where many students thrive because it just pushes them to do more, I preferred rather working with people in a very collaborative way. So think about the behavioral norms. If you do have the privilege of visiting a university over a summer or over a break, I highly encourage you do that so that you are able to actually see what it's like to be at that particular university or college. If you don't have those opportunities, again, there are so many online resources that you could look into. As part of what we'll be sharing with you after this particular webinar, I've put together a package of things that you could look through and just some opportunities for you to utilize resources and worksheets when thinking through college research, generally speaking. Residential culture. Do they have houses that are named, and are there competitions to build collegiality? Are there separate colleges within the university, like a school of business or a school of engineering or school of arts? Or is it just one university where you are able to go into the different courses that you desire? And are there learning communities? Do people come together to share in learning exercises? Does the school have particular initiatives that they are trying to bring the community together? And then finally, the extracurricular ecosystem. And I come from a city, so I'm born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa. I've always lived in a city, but I also always had an interest in nature. And for me, something that was really important about universities that I did not want to be in a city. And my motivation was to be in the outdoors, to really focus on my academic growth and journey, not to be distracted by the busyness of a city. And so the proper environment for me was where I could do hiking with a group of friends, or I could learn how to farm, for example. It's all of these different things that make up what the extracurricular ecosystem is going to do for you in order to support your learning journey. And so, with this in mind, I think that it's really important to think about the institutional priorities and how you are able to leverage this when it comes to applying to universities. I don't think that applying for, let's say, anthropology as your intended major is going to give you an upper hand when applying to a school like Williams College, that is a liberal arts college, but they have a very strong STEM program. Oftentimes, students think that they can play with the system and try to choose a major that's not popular in order to get into it. That's not really the case. And what I wanted to highlight here is when thinking about the majors and how there are various shifts. Perhaps most students are interested in AI and computer science, given what's happening globally. And so not as many students are studying the humanities, and there's a talent gap there. I think that if you're able to, let's be honest with ourselves, and you really want to study computer science, while in high school, rather make yourself an expert in computer science and AI ethics so that you're not just coming in as a computer science major who wants to study computer programming and that's it. Perhaps you want a double major and you want to do computer science and philosophy or computer science and sociology. And that's going to make you stand out. So instead of thinking about lying, quote unquote, in an application process, by choosing a major that you're not really interested in. Rather, I would say take a different approach. Think about how you are able to grow, and what are the opportunities for you to develop intellectually, and what are the benefits of the humanities when thinking about things like AI and computer science. Similarly, now I think that after all of this intense research that you've been doing, we need to think about how do you construct your list strategically. So you need to balance the probability, think about the program strength. My advice to students is never apply to a university that you're not going to be excited to attend, because sometimes we feel so much pressure that we want to apply to a large university that has a very high admission rate just because we want to secure a place. It is important. It is an important next step in your life, but does it fit what you are looking for in a university? And are you going to be happy for the 4 years of your life at that particular university in a different country? So be very honest in your self-reflection when creating it. Avoid clustering in hyper-selective majors. Don't put all of your eggs in one pot, so to speak. So rather think about how are you approaching your interest and the end goal. Think about your mission, the mission that you want to achieve, and the career that you want for yourself instead of solely focusing on majors when approaching this particular process. And then finally, just ensure that you have two likely schools, but they have to have a strong alignment, as I mentioned earlier, with who you are and what you want to do. So some of the strategic list examples that we could look at, let's say, for example, you're really interested in politics and economics. You could apply to Amherst, Chicago, Yale, Claremont McKenna, University of Richmond, Macalester College. Engineering, Purdue, Georgia Tech, Olin, UIUC, Santa Clara. And then computational sciences, Carnegie Mellon, Brown, Tufts, Rochester, University of Wisconsin. These are giving you different types of schools or fantastic universities that have programs that are really strong within these particular majors. And then finally, well, sort of finally, something that I think families are really interested in, and I've been seeing more and more conversations with parents about this, is will my child have any opportunities after graduating? You are investing a lot of money in your education, and so it's really important to think about what are the graduate pipelines. Are students getting a seamless transition from the undergraduate institution and going into postgraduate studies? Let's say you want to do law, or you want to do your MBA, or you want to go to engineering school or architectural school. Are there clear pathways for students? And part of this is going to be additional work that you'll need to do. The information is definitely on school websites, but at the same time, if you cannot find the information readily available to you, reach out to the universities. They'd be more than happy to share that information. Internship ecosystems, as I've mentioned before, are there opportunities to do internships at every stage? Some of the data shows that students who get a job within the first 3 months of graduating university, it's oftentimes a position that comes from an internship that they did while being an undergraduate student. And so this then becomes a really important part of it. And then finally, undergraduate research. Can you publish in a journey? Do you have a senior thesis that you can write? Are there capstone projects? Because this is going to build your overall CV and resume for when you apply to university and think clearly about those opportunities. I'm not going to go into much more detail when it comes to research, but when you are approaching the university list creation process, building your school list, I think that you need to create a system that is going to compare apples for apples, meaning that when you're looking at an academic program, you should be saying, okay, computer science at school A, computer science at school B. Perhaps school B is going to give you an additional opportunity to do something really innovative in computer science and urban planning because they are a school known for urban planning. And how can we use technology and digitization to think about the future of cities, right? So then you think about school B has a little bit more in there. So perhaps let's rank it a little bit higher than school A when it comes to their computer science program. Make sure also that when you are looking at the university, that your rating is not solely based on an emotion. Emotions are important. You need to feel connected to the school, but don't let it be influenced by outside factors. Really think about your story and the university. And then finally, when assessing the opportunities that students have after graduation, it's going to be paramount for you to think about where do you want to be. If you are uncertain at this point, and that's totally fine, students are only 17 or 16 or 18 when applying to university, and knowing the rest of your life is impossible because it's definitely going to change. But always consider what are the two main things that I want to do? Perhaps it's graduate school, and perhaps the other one is becoming a consultant. Do deep research into how students get those opportunities and are those opportunities at the universities that you're looking at. And as we know, it's the middle of application season. If you are a senior, I've mentioned it right at the beginning, you've probably applied early decision or early action elsewhere. It's really going to be important for you to manage your time, your documentation, your mental health, your well-being to ensure that you are not burning out through this. And you plan in order to avoid burnout. So create coordinated tracks for writing academics recommendations. Speak to your counselor. Ask if all recommendations have been submitted. Look at your academic performance. If there's at any point something that you're concerned about academically, speak to your teachers, be proactive. And for your own essays that you need to write, ensure that they are written at least 4 weeks is my sort of like good spot because you're going to do multiple different drafts of it. However, within 2 weeks of an external deadline, you should have the entire application ready to submit. That should be the last part of it. And how you do this is that you think about each week on week, what do I need to achieve? Create micro deadlines for yourself. Don't think about this as one big experience that you need to get done all at once. There is a famous saying that goes, how do you eat an elephant? And the response is piece by piece. And so it's really important to note that the micro deadlines is going to help you chip away at this large thing that you need to achieve, but in small doses. And then centralized dashboards and tracking your progress, that is going to be key. I can't tell you that even as a professional, I rely so much on dashboards and tracking my progress on things that I do. And this is something that I had hoped that I had known when I was a student, both in college and even before. Because if you're able to have a dashboard where you're updating and it's telling you that you've completed a task and that another task is due soon, that is just going to help you manage your time and it holds you accountable. I think this is one of the most important parts of a dashboard that you share with your parents as students or parents if you are creating the dashboard for your child, that you both have visibility over it so that you can see the progress as it happens and as it unfolds. And so all of this then again ties into the entire way that you go into the various rounds of the application. early decision deadlines have passed. So I hope that if you are a senior on this particular call, that you've applied as an early decision applicant because the probability is really high of getting in early decision. It gets more and more challenging as it goes. There's also restrictive early action for for some universities. And then early action, it's an early signal that says if you get into that particular university, you can put it in as a measure to ensure that you have an option. And then perhaps in regular decision, you can be a little bit more ambitious. And this is sort of how top applicants stay organized when thinking about these different cycles. Pre-writing essays way before peak season, you do your workload clusters, and then finally maintaining academic performance and momentum. This is so important. Senior year is challenging. The application makes it that much more challenging. And oftentimes we see students who feel a lot of pressure because of the application, but they begin to dip when it comes to their academic performance. And that is going to have a negative impact on your overall outcome when applying to universities. And so you want to ensure that you are giving yourself room to breathe and room to grow because your academics should be having a steady increase instead of declining. And this is, as we wrap up today, a final note from me is that the university list should reflect who you are as a person. And that includes intellectual identity, ambition, long-term direction. I'm using these three pillars when thinking about the strategy because I don't want you as a student to apply to a university because you think it's your only option. Apply to a university that is going to push you, that's going to challenge you, that is going to make you and your family proud. But ensure that it's not just because of the name or the ranking. It should be a part of your intellectual identity and also the academic and personal culture. Because true success comes from thinking about how the next 4 years of your life is going to be a part of your journey, not the final destination. And where do you go to from there? That becomes a really important question. I've had friends who've gone to fantastic universities globally, not just the US, but even in the UK. I'm talking about some of the top names that you've heard. And they've said that it wasn't the right fit for them. They are grateful for their academic and intellectual journey, but they felt like they didn't have the opportunities that they were really keen on having. And so in their careers later in life, they've made big shifts. And it's okay to make those big shifts. I think that we're constantly changing as people. But had they had the mentorship or perhaps the opportunity to try something different, they would have been in a very different position at this moment in time. And so it is important to think about how the next 4 years is going to, in part, shape your future. And that then becomes a key part of the university list itself. So thank you all so much for spending time with us today, and I'll leave the floor open for any questions that you might have.